Hey, welcome to the Nether Region Podcast, where we get down and we get dirty. The name is still in the works. I'm not sure about it. But yeah, I wanted to start this podcast both because I love the clips on TikTok where it'll be from a podcast and they get like really introspective of like Emma Chamberlain and just like every single podcast, I think. I just fucking love them. And I think that that's the aim, is to have those clips of me on TikTok like that. But otherwise, I think the other reason that I wanted to do this was because I feel like I've been through a lot. I've lived through a lot. Wait, I have a note here. I'm going to read it. Yeah, I feel like I've lived and learnt through a lot and I've made a lot of mistakes so that you don't have to. But I also feel like I've had a lot of advantages and I've like made a lot of success and stuff like that. So I feel like it's a cool way for us to learn and grow and navigate lots of different facets of life together. So yeah, let's roll the intro. Woo! We are back. Yeah, I thought I'd intro what this podcast is going to be about. I think it's a good way to start off this whole podcast thing with friendships because connection is such an important part of all our lives. And I think whether good things are happening or bad things are happening, we always seem to rely and go to friends as our first kind of instinct, and have their support or have their, kinds of inclusion in whatever is going on in your life. So I feel like that's what is a really good way to start this podcast and start navigating some different things together. But yeah, I think that we're going to get down and dirty, we're going to get deep and personal, but we're also just going to have a good time. And I really thank you for being here. But yeah, I think friendships are absolutely incredible. They can make you learn so many things about yourself, but also other people. And I think that's something that's truly special. And I think friendships is something that is so unique to every individual, but it's also so broad and so relatable and is felt by so many people around the world. And I feel like it's what so many people aspire to, because there's such a trust in friendship. And I feel like that's really, really, really beautiful. For me, friends are so important, even as someone who I would say I'm quite independent and, like to do a lot of work by myself. I would say that connection and networking, just like, connections in general are so important. However, I feel like throughout my life, I've had so many crushes on friends. All through like primary school and stuff. I remember like I would talk to girls and who are my friends and stuff, and like they'd be telling me like, oh, I have a crush on somebody, and I'd be like, oh my god, like who is it? Like, when like you'd have that thing like you're slowly trying to like get the answer out, and like they don't want to say, and then while they're like trying to, like while they're revealing certain things about it, but not giving it away, you're like starting to think, is it me? But yeah, I feel like that was definitely my experience, was like having crushes on girls, and when like they'd start talking about a crush, I'd start like hoping that it was me and trying to get answers out that would like, oh, like does he have like brown hair, or like does his name start with a T? But yeah, I'm exposing a lot about myself. Very, very front up. That's not the phrase. What else was I thinking about? Oh yeah, I just have such like a habit of getting crushes on friends, and I'm not sure where it comes from. I think it might just come from the fact that what I want from a romantic relationship is what is in a friendship, and it's just simply a romantic friendship in its very essence. But I feel like also me having crushes on my friends, not only in primary school, but also in high school, especially in high school, was the awakening of my queer identity and of my sexuality in general. Because I remember the very way that I found out that I was starting to like boys and that kind of thing. I was in a production, and this boy who I was like kind of friends, he was in the year above, and he was putting this like tie on me while we were backstage in a production because I couldn't do it. And I was like, can you please help me with this? And I'd already kind of thought like, he's kind of attractive. Like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't like think I had a crush on him, but when like you just have an infatuation, like maybe I want to be like them. Maybe I just want to be friends with them. Later on, I realized that I liked him. But yeah, I was like, oh, can you please help me like put this tie on? He was like, yeah, of course. And it was this really, really beautiful thing for me. Especially because it didn't involve anything sexual or like overtly like physical, if you know what I mean. But yeah, we were just like quite close, and he was putting like the tie around my neck all quite close, and like just like giggling a little and just like smiling and stuff. And I don't know what it was about that, but it was the awakening of my queer experience and my queer identity, I feel. So I feel like that's where that's where friendships have gotten me. Is a lot of self-discovery, I think, especially in relation to my sexuality, as I've kind of navigated having crushes on friends and how that exploring that with both like female friends and male friends, and just friends of all different genders and identities and backgrounds and stuff like that. I feel like it's the very core of me finding out who I'm attracted to and stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like it's very core what I want from a partnership and a relationship is at its very essence a romantic friendship, like I said before, and maybe you feel the same way. Because I feel like in order to have a good relationship, you need to be friends with them. And I know that sounds like so simple, but it's so fundamental that you don't just enjoy them for the romance or for the physical attributes, or like in a transactional sense where like, oh, well, they're really helpful, or like they do a lot of things for me. They show me a lot of love and affection. I feel like it has to be a sort of friendship where you love them at the very core of who they are, and not for the things they do or the way they look or these very superficial kind of things, I guess would be the phrasing I would use. But yeah, obviously that conflation of friendships and relationships has caused some issues in my own life with like having crushes on friends, and just the concept of friends with benefits, which is kind of where this like queer awakening with this person in year 7 who was putting the tie around my neck, how that translated when I became more interested in the physical affection sides of things with friends with benefits. And I feel like it caused so many issues. For one example, when I had I didn't even really have a crush on this person, but we were I don't know how much I should be saying, but we were overseas with like this school group. We're on this trip, and he had just broken up with his girlfriend at the time, and we were staying in the same room together. And one thing led to another, and we were talking about being queer and being gay, and just like being attracted to boys in general, and you know how that was interconnected with sexual acts and stuff like that. Yeah, one thing led to another, and we ended up like getting together. Not like anything like serious. We were like, I'm not going to say what year, but like we were quite young. We're in high school. So yeah, I feel like after that, after we got back from the trip, we kind of already established that it wasn't going to be a romantic thing. It was purely just a fun thing. We were friends. It was in the moment, but also like we hung out for like a month after that on this trip, and like yeah, we're all friends. Nothing was like really awkward. It was just quite funny. It was like yeah, like it happened. We tried to keep it a secret from the rest of the people in the group, but they ultimately found out. But I think it was so awesome that it didn't make it awkward with our friendship, and that our friendship was strong enough and not fragile in the way that it could be tainted by something like that. And I feel like that's such an issue with so many friends with benefits kind of situations. But yeah, after we returned from this trip a couple months later, the guy that I had gotten with and that I was friends with and had that experience with started dating another one of my friends. And it seemed like such a betrayal in some way. And I'm not sure, because we talked about like, oh, if we want to do this act again, or like do something similar in the future, like this can be a fun thing that we do. Like there's no feelings involved, like no incredible, massive romantic feelings involved. So like no one's getting hurt kind of thing. And yeah, that was the plan, that we would kind of do that. And I remember saying like, oh, do you want to do something soon? And I remember him, I can't remember actually what he said, but he was like really, really down for it. And then a couple days later, he was like, oh, I might have to call off a thing because I think I'm getting into a relationship. That phrasing, by the way, is crazy. I think I'm getting into a relationship. But no. So yeah, he ended up getting into a relationship secretly with one of my closest friends at the time. And it had kind of like, not gone around my back, but they were just trying to keep it on the low from everyone. And I remember just feeling really betrayed and like backstabbed and like double-sided in a way. Not like severely, but in just the way like, oh, like I thought we had something and maybe that's, maybe that's just my habit of getting really, really attached. But I think it's interesting that I felt that way, but we weren't exclusive, and I knew in my head we weren't exclusive. It just seemed so strange to me. And I think that's one of the things where friends with benefits can definitely kind of not end the best way, and someone will always end up getting hurt because eventually, hopefully, the situation's going to end and one of you is going to get in a relationship or start developing feelings for someone else and not want to continue this on for fear of it hurting this new partner that's come into your life. So I feel like that's where my conflation with friendships and romantic relationships has led me. It hasn't always led me down the best path, but I think it's also made me value my friends so much more. Is my want for a romantic relationship is very much a romantic friendship. So in the times where I wasn't in a relationship, I was almost treating my friends like they were significant others, just without any of the physical kind of stuff. So I feel like that was such an interesting thing, and I feel like it's still very much that way with certain friends. And it's not all friends. I think it's very much a small group. And I think that also comes from me being quite a flirty personality with friends at times, where it becomes this kind of romantic friendship kind of thing. But yeah, I feel like when I'm having those romantic kind of friendships, it can kind of make me forget about the need for a partner, because I'm getting all the feelings and all the endorphins and serotonin. I don't actually know what the right neurotransmitters are, but but I'm like getting all the things that I would want from a relationship. I'm getting that friendship that I wanted. I'm, getting this certain romantic feelings. I'm getting this partnership, this person that I can depend on and be not codependent, but I can coexist with. So yeah, I feel like that's what, especially last year, I don't know like if there was any particular reason, but I feel like I had a really, really strong group with like certain people and like certain individuals that it became a thing where I didn't really even think about a partner in that sense. So yeah, I feel like that was such an interesting thing that I'd kind of eradicated the need for a relationship purely because of how strong my friendships were. And that reminds me of the thing where it's like, if you get in a relationship, like you have 10 strong, I'm going to butcher this, but there's something about you have 10 strong people in your life who like really, really strong people. Maybe it's 5, I have no idea. But when you get into a relationship, those 10 people, your significant other accounts for 2 or 3 of them. So because of that, you're going to lose 2 or 3 people who are really close to you just because of this one person, just because of how the human social behaviors go. I thought that's so interesting because I'm having these really strong relationships, I guess, with friends. Yeah. I don't know where I was going at that point because it just came to my head, but I feel like it's really interesting, that point of like significant other accounts for 2 people. And what does that mean if your friendship exceeds what others or society might deem as a standard baseline friendship, when it becomes more romantic and you're giving more than just like connection and stability and camaraderie? I don't know. Yeah. But I think ultimately what I've learned, especially through any friends with benefits kind of situations and just in life in general, is that you need to know yourself in order to be a good friend, because in that way you're not projecting, and in that way you're not hurting them because of your own insecurities or your own faults. So yeah, I think that's just been my philosophy is that in order to be a good friend, you have to be a good friend to yourself, and you have to know yourself, and that takes a certain amount of introspection and work and healing on yourself, which is something that I'm not obsessed with, but I find it so interesting how we not force ourselves, but how we grow up and we learn things, and after a certain amount of time, we have to start unlearning those things, behaviors and thoughts that aren't healthy or are really, really problematic. And for some people, I was talking about this with my friend Robert, how sometimes there'll be people who won't go through that unlearning stage and check their beliefs and check their preconceived ideas, their prejudices. There's going to be people who go throughout life and never consider their thought patterns and the way that they go about life. And I feel like that's so interesting that they're going to take, that these people, a majority of people, I would think, especially I feel like in an older generation, but I'm not really sure, would go through their 80, 90 years of life by never questioning their thought patterns that were established and, constructed when they were like 5 years old, in those like really impressionable years from like birth to maybe like in their late teens. I feel like that's so interesting. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. But yeah, I feel like the very pinnacle of friendships is school friendships. I feel like that's where so many of us have our first sense of those kind of close camaraderie, is that a word? Kind of connections. And I feel like it ties in with my philosophy of needing to know yourself to be a good friend. But then on the other hand, school friendships are where we make the most friends, I would think, where it's this time of change and this time of self-discovery and uncertainty where you don't know yourself, whereby it goes against this philosophy or this idea that I subscribe to. And I think because of that, friendships so often in school settings can be tainted or can become disingenuous just by the very nature that we are rapidly changing and developing and finding new facets of ourselves. So I feel like that's a very key reason why a lot of school friendships, and I feel like you would know this too, where there's so much drama and change and friendship kind of banter and stuff like that, and just drama and breakups and fall aparts and stuff like that. But also in school, I feel like there's such a tendency to make friends purely out of safety and protection and the security that friendships and friends and a support network can offer, like the power in numbers kind of vibe. Yeah, and I feel like in schools, who you're friends with determines your status, and even thereby, like, it contributes to your experience of school so much. I feel like your status within school can so detrimentally impact the way that you go about your schooling career and time. So yeah, I feel like that's possibly a reason why a lot of people change groups, is because of a desire to increase or change their status. I know for me, I feel like throughout school, I've like just graduated about 2 days ago, but I feel like throughout school I was always quite popular, and especially in the start of my high school career time, in year 7, I was in the popular group. I was very much involved with them, not so much exclusively. I had lots of other friends outside of that in different kind of groups, and we'll touch on like different groups and the way we act in different groups later on. By we, I mean I. There's no team here, but well, that sounded really, I meant there's no one else working on this project. Anyway, I was part of this popular group, and it came to like halfway through the year, maybe like end of the year. And I feel like at first I had kind of clung on to this group because of the security and the status, and I guess the power that this so-called popular group held. And I think we recognized ourselves as the popular group, and they would go on to recognize themselves as the popular group. And I feel like the idea of a popular group in high schools and schools in general is so crazy that we deem it like that because of how movies portray it and just how it is in general. But I've talked about this with friends so many times that so often are the people who, like, you literally call them, oh, the popular group. They're often not the most popular people, by the fact that majority of the year level won't like them, will not respect them, will sometimes despise or resent them. But yet we still deem them the popular group because they align with what our idea of a popular group is from movies, whereby they're mean or intimidating, or they are attractive or confident and stuff like that. I feel like that's so interesting that sometimes the people who we deem the popular people are often the ones who are not the most popular and liked. Yeah, that's an interesting point. But is it because they are popular that they become disliked because they take that power? Interesting. We're getting introspective. But yeah, I feel like who you're friends with determines so much of your status in high school. And yeah, I think unconsciously, especially in school, we use friends as protection. And because of that, because of the security that it provides in a time where you're not like secure and like you're changing a lot, I feel like it offers so much protection. Thereby it becomes transactional, whereby you're using them. I love the word thereby, don't I? Where you're using them, maybe unconsciously, for protection and for possibly the status that being friends and connected and associated with this person brings. I think that's something to think about, is do you gain some sort of status purely by being associated in people's minds with your certain friends or your group? Yeah, I feel like that's really, really interesting. But also, like, in the sphere of friendships being transactional, I know that for me, I would always feel so bad about like other parents like driving me places, or like if I was going to a friend's house more than they came to mine, because I was so scared. Maybe unconsciously, I don't know what it was. Maybe I just felt guilty and like a burden or something. And I feel like I still do a little bit in response. Like I want it to be an equal friendship, and I don't want them to think it's transactional. But I would always feel bad if like I was getting driven more than I would drive my friend, or our parents would drive them, because I was so scared of it being reduced to such like, not superficial, but yeah, transactional. I'm wary to use that word too much for fear of it losing its meaning. Yeah, and I feel like we need to, like, leaving behind friendships purely for the protection they bring, the status it brings, the possible benefits that it brings with, say, something like you getting driven around a lot, or maybe they're rich, and maybe when you go to their house, like you get like better food, or maybe like their parents will get you something. I don't know what it means to you and how that resonates, but I think leaving that aside and finding genuine people who don't expect anything more than respect. I feel like that's such, I mean, it seems so easy and it seems so clear, but often we forget it so much. Yeah, just finding those genuine people who want you and who you want for nothing more than respect. And I felt like at times, especially throughout the different friendships that I've been involved in, I felt like I was expected, or there was this pressure for me to be the funny one, and, you know, for me to make people laugh, or in other circumstances for me to, you know, be like a therapist, or to listen, and just, that was my role. And I feel like a lot of times, even still, I think a lot of people use me and use others for those gains, and simply as a way for them to ease their emotional traumas and their own emotional things that are going on. But that is so draining. But yeah, regardless of how draining, how detrimental it can be on ourselves, where we are surrounded by this like negative energy, and this constant complaining, or this constant need for to be healed, for these other people to be healed by us just by listening or by trying to give them some rationality, that can become really draining. And despite it being that draining source, we sometimes stay when we shouldn't, because we want that protection, we want that stability that friendship inherently brings. And at its very core, we as humans crave connection so badly. I remember watching this TED Talk, because sometimes I like to watch TED Talks to feel really smart. But it was this one I'm pretty sure it was about addiction, and I love the way the guy speaks in it. He has such like a cool accent. Not that it's relevant, but I remember him talking about mice being cured of like depression, anxiety, and like addiction or something when they were in an environment, like when they were surrounded by other mice and they had a community. They were cured of addiction and depression and anxiety purely by the fact that they were surrounded by a community and they weren't isolated. I feel like that's so crazy that they were able to, dismiss, and they were able to choose other mice who provided nothing other than just connection, purely for... I feel like my camera has just possibly died. I'm going to check up on this right now, and in the meantime, we're going to have a little sponsor break. So, go ahead. Hi, Tom didn't realize that this isn't a really big production yet, and we don't have a sponsor yet. But I just wanted to take the time to say thanks for listening, and I think he's fixed the camera by now, so just pretend we hadn't had a break, okay? Okay. Enjoy. Hi, we're back. Thank you for going through that. Thank you for our sponsor. We really, really appreciate it. After this, we're going to start an ASMR channel. But yeah, I thought it was so interesting about these mice that would, stop using these drugs that would have such good feeling effects on them, that would make them feel so incredible just because they were surrounded by mice. They would choose that community over that. And I feel like that just demonstrates the importance of connection for all individuals. Because we need groups and we want to belong and we want to have a purpose. And that's what friendships and communities and connections provide us with. They provide us with a purpose. And I feel like that's why there's such a popularity of friendship groups. But I want to issue almost a warning that the quality of a friendship or a friendship group is so much more important than the quantity. I feel like I've seen so many groups of people, and especially in high school, I don't know why I keep bringing it back to high school. I feel like that's where we're exposed to so many different friendship groups, and such different array of people where we're forced to spend so much time with them. But I remember seeing so many people in high school who half their group would hate the other half. And you're in a friendship group together and one half of the group would hate and despise and resent the other half. But I feel like they stayed together because there's power in numbers, and often it was the popular groups who would, out of fear of having any disruption or having the awkwardness and feeling uncomfortable, whatever, they would stay with it because it provided that sense of power and that status. But I sometimes feel like, I feel like a lot of people, those people in particular who stay in a friendship group despite it not being the best one for them, where it might be toxic or something, I feel like sometimes they might think that sometimes it feels easier to endure a certainty of pain and being uncomfortable than venturing out and facing the uncertainty of being independent and alone for a little bit. It's easier to endure the for sure fact that there's going to be a bit of not feeling good and being uncomfortable than being put in a situation where there's a certain level of uncertainty, where you leave that friendship group and you're isolated. And people would rather be in that state of pain and being uncomfortable and being awkward in that friendship group than being by themselves or trying to find other friends who might be better, finding genuine people. And that's just, again, so interesting to me. And I remember when I was younger, for years, I acted different depending on, what group I was in. And I feel like I did it out of what felt like necessity, because, I wanted to be loved and I wanted to be included, but I would act so different in every single friendship group that I was a part of. I would change my voice and my way of speaking and the topics we talked about, my body language, and like depending on whether I was in a group with, theatre people or certain boys or certain girls or the older groups or sporty mates or something, I would change how I acted. And I remember just recently someone was talking to me about how in relationships, not friendships, it might have been friendships as well, but we were talking specifically about their approach to relationships, that their habit is to, act in a way and change themselves for how they thought partners would want them to be. And I feel like that is so saddening that they felt that they had to do that in order to be loved. But also, I feel like it's never going to work if that's how you're approaching relationships. And I remember seeing a TikTok about this, but it also just it resonated and it just made a certain level of sense that I didn't think it needed to be made. But I think despite me thinking it didn't need to be made, it hit home, because I know so many people like it who just change the way that they are when they're around someone that they like. They're around a crush, and even they might know that they're not acting how they want to act, or they're not acting like themselves or who they are at their very deep core. But my question is, if you're changing a certain amount of yourself to be in a relationship with someone, to get someone's attention, to draw them to you, to attract them, and you succeed, you've picked out what they wanted in a partner, you've acted your way through it, you've put on the grandest performance, and they are hooked in, they're attracted to you, and maybe you start dating them. Maybe you're in a relationship for a little bit. What do you think is going to happen when you inevitably, because however long the relationship's going for, what do you think they're going to respond with when you start slowly acting more like yourself and who you truly are and genuinely are? They might not want you anymore. Not because of who you are at your core, but because of who they thought you were. And their expectation has, been thrown out the window. And they feel a certain level of dishonesty and feeling like they've been misled. They were attracted to the version that you had created. So that's never going to work out in a relationship in that sense. And I feel like that all stems both, people who I know who do that kind of behavior, but also me when I was younger, divvying up myself into these different personalities depending on the group I was in. I feel like it all stems from an insecure and disjointed identity and sense of self and a sense of who I wanted to be, not knowing who I wanted to be in every situation, as opposed to just when I'm in certain situations with certain friends. And I feel like it caused me so much anxiety if I was ever faced with interacting with people from two different friendship groups. Say I was walking through the mall or hanging out with someone, a sporting mate or something like that, someone from tennis or someone from footy or something like that. And, someone from theatre or someone from school would also be down the street, and I'd run into them. And suddenly I'm confronted with two opposing personalities that I've created with two individuals. And to dedicate myself to one of these personalities or these personas, to dedicate myself to one of them in that situation and act that certain way that I had previously established, it threatened the other friendship, and it would reveal that I'd been disingenuous. But yeah, I remember it causing me so much anxiety if I was ever to be faced in a situation like that. And I knew that I was, being dishonest and that I was being disingenuous. And I felt like I was lying. I felt like I had the biggest secret that I was just burdened by. But just the feeling of, trying to figure out in the moment, in a couple of seconds, how am I going to mix these identities that I've created, these little small parts of my personality? How am I going to mix them in this situation so that I can preserve the two friendships in front of me, the two personalities, the two memories, the two series of memories that I've created with these two individuals? How am I going to mix how I've acted so that none of them become aware of the fact that I have been presenting myself in a way that is not true to who I am? And maybe at the time that was true to me. This is what I'm just thinking now in the moment, but maybe this disjointed part of myself, as much as I think that it was disingenuous, maybe it was the most honest thing that I could do, to present myself in a disjointed way that was honest, because that's how I was in the journey of self-discovery, figuring out who I am, who I wanted to be. Maybe that was the most honest way. And obviously that led to me needing to, do some introspection and think about myself in the way that I am, and really reflect on combining all these parts of me that were honest, because at their very core, all those parts of me, although they didn't feel genuine, they were all living parts of me. And maybe you feel the same way, like acting different with different friends. But yeah, I feel like then it just comes back to like why knowing yourself, knowing your triggers, knowing your boundaries, knowing your traumas, knowing your habits, your thought patterns, your hopes, your perception of who you want to be. That's all so important, not only to your relationship with yourself, but your relationship with others and your friendships. Because otherwise you're only sharing a small part of you, as I said before. And although that part might be true and it may not be dishonest and disingenuous, it's a small part, and you're restricting other people from experiencing all the beautiful parts of your identity and your personality and just your life and experiences and memories. I feel like to restrict that is so depressing and demeaning to yourself. It diminishes who you are to this one idea and to this personality. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's so important. You need to know who you are, and be true to who you are at your deepest core. I'm very comfy now. I've just pulled my hood up. Because otherwise you're just projecting. You're projecting your own insecurities, and I feel like it's just not healthy to be in a friendship where you don't know yourself particularly well. But yeah, I think being genuine, I'm trying to read my note right now because otherwise I thought I would get really, really distracted. You need to be genuine and, oh yes, I remember this. Was that? Oh my God, I thought there was a caterpillar in the room. It's just a leaf that I brought in. I feel like you have to be genuine in order to invite honesty and vulnerability. If you subscribe to any of the laws of attraction and stuff, you need to be what you want to be. No, be what you want to receive in order to have that reflected in your life. I'm not sure if that's the particular lingo that they would use. But I feel like in order to attract people who are good for you, you need to be the person who's good for yourself, so that you're attracting those like-minded people. And sometimes I feel like I'm trying to read my note again. Sometimes feeling... Can someone read my flippin' hell? Oh my God. Stop it. I read it. Don't worry. Relating back to the story before of the friend who would act in different ways for partnerships and act the way that they thought they wanted to be. Sometimes this particular person, they said they felt scared to open up because other people who they had been vulnerable with had, betrayed their trust, and that they'd used those vulnerabilities and those weaknesses and those insecurities against them. So I feel like that both comes back to a certain level of trust that you need to have in a relationship and friendship, but also having enough respect for yourself where you don't see past the red flags or the faults or flaws. I think sometimes you need to look past the faults and flaws most of the time, but when it's certain behaviors that are demeaning and disrespectful to yourself, I feel like that's something that you can't look past. And it comes back to, you need to have and do the work to have so much respect for yourself. Do you know what I mean? So that people can't mistreat you like that. Or the chances of it happening are less because you're not attracting those kinds of people into your life. But ultimately, friendships, they do come and go, and that's sometimes one of the hardest things. I think sometimes a breakup with a friendship is harder than a romantic one. I'm not really sure why. I wouldn't classify romantic relationships, in my view, as superficial, but I feel like maybe just through my experience and my own perception of friendships, I feel like it's more deep-rooted in emotions and experiences and memories, and maybe that's why my approach to romantic relationships is flawed in that way. Maybe that's why maybe that's something that needs to be worked through and developed. Really figure out that a bit more. But yeah, I feel like friendship breakups a lot of the time can be really, really painful. And it can be a provoked breakup. When I'm saying a breakup right now, I'm talking about a friendship breakup where it can be provoked. It can be because of a fight. Maybe someone said something they shouldn't have. Maybe they went and did something. Maybe they got with someone who you had a crush on. I don't know what it is. Maybe it was provoked in that way and you had a fight, or it was just some kind of trigger. But they can also just fade away. And sometimes the fading away ones are harder because there doesn't seem to be any cause. There doesn't seem to be anything that you can fix. And some of the times you recognize that you don't want to fix it, or that nothing can fix it. That sometimes those friends become just like a distant memory. They become so far removed from what you thought they were or who they used to be, and you just grow apart. Yeah. Sometimes friends just fade away. And then maybe you'll think about them one day. Maybe you'll see a post of them on social media, and you kind of just realize that you don't know them anymore. They've almost become unrecognizable. A stranger to you, but with a familiar face. Someone who, is unrecognizable. A random person. They've become a random with a voice that seems so familiar and that you know so well. They become just this person who just seems so unidentifiable, and I feel like that's so brutal. That someone who you were once so close to can just become a friend request from someone who is like now only just a set of memories. I feel like it's so painful to have to endure that. Yeah. But I think it's about letting those happen and trying not to put a time frame on relationships, on friendships. And that's where I feel like I have a problem with people using the term BFF and till death do us part. And I'm going to talk about that right after our second sponsor. Oh, no, okay, Tom hasn't learnt from last time, mainly because we didn't tell him and we did keep it a secret, but we still don't have a sponsor. He could be taking a toilet break or fixing the camera again. It is hard to say. Yeah, how's it going so far? Do you feel like the podcast is going well? I hope you're doing great. Like, you're killing it. Yeah. Otherwise, should I let him go back, or like, should we just give him a bit more time? Yeah. I'm gonna send you back to him now, if that's okay. Stay safe. Also, oh my god, before I let you go, did you know that Netherlands is called Netherland because nether means under? Also, the reason why this is called Nether Regions, because my name's Tom Nethersole, and it's Nether Regions is a funny word for the groin. But Netherlands is called Netherlands because nether means under, and Netherlands is under the sea level. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, I'll let him get back to his really deep, meaningful talks. He's really, really wise. And we're back. Thank you so much for joining us. I feel like I should drink some water, but we're not going to. We're going to continue on. Thank you so much for going through that ad break. Yeah, I feel like that guy on TikTok who's a Birkin, another Birkin. Anyway, let's get back to the show. I was talking about not putting a time frame on friendships, and I feel like that's where my problem with people who use the term like BFFs, like best friends forever, or even just like the marriage declaration and promise of till death do us part. I feel like it creates such a pressure for certain friendships and partnerships and connections to last, where I feel like that's just not in our human nature to do. And I feel like that it's such an argument that's brought up with like marrying the one person for life and being in one relationship for life. It's that's not within our human nature, and that there's a growing trend of people moving away from this sense of not so much monogamy, but one partner for life, and, you know, not restricting themselves to one partner for however long their life lasts. I feel like it creates a pressure, and it's not attainable for most people, this idea of best friends forever or till death do us part. And I feel like that's where this whole idea that is like, as soon as you get a tattoo, this permanent thing of a partner's name, as soon as you get this commitment of their name onto you, you're more likely to break up, because you've set this constraint, and now there is now more than just the reason that you like them to stay with them. There's this pressure that, oh, I better stay with them because if we break up, what am I going to do with this tattoo? So now the thought pattern of I'm with him because I like him for who he is and who he is as a person, and simply because of that, there's no other reason. I just like him or them for how they are. Now it's become I like them for them, but also it'd be pretty awkward if we broke up because I have a tattoo of his name on me. So I think no matter what facet of life, what I've been trying to learn lately is to simply enjoy where you are now, not put any constraints or put any pressures or think too much about the past or the future, and just not so much live in the present, but just, I mean, in my last couple of days and weeks of school, the question that I kept getting asked from teachers and family friends and other like kids in my year level was, how are you feeling about it? Like, are you scared, excited? Like are you going to miss it? And I was just thinking, no. Like, I feel like that's not in my opinion, I feel like that's not a good way to go about it. And obviously, I'm not going to subscribe or adhere to this thinking all the time. And it's very, very pretentious to an almighty to think that, like, you can do this all the time. But the mindset that I was trying to get myself into was that I'm simply going to enjoy the good parts of these last couple of weeks at school. You've got the routine, you have, all your friends in one place, you have all these resources. These are awesome things you can enjoy while you're at school or in whatever. But in saying that, when I leave, I'm also going to enjoy the freedoms and the new experiences and the new opportunities that arise. I'm simply going to enjoy what time I have left here. And when it's gone, and when I leave school, I'm going to enjoy what time I have out of there and what opportunities come out of there. But I feel like it's difficult to actually enact. It's difficult to follow. And yeah, I feel like that kind of mentality, as best we can, maybe we should try and apply that to our own lives and enjoying what privileges we have in this life, and what a privilege it is to simply be a conscious being. It's crazy how lucky we all are. And obviously, we all have different amounts of privilege. Of course, I'm a white cisgender male. There is an immense privilege to that, as well as, living in a certain country and growing up with a certain amount of wealth and opportunities. There's so many things about my life that I'm so privileged to have. And while there's so many people who are underprivileged, I think there is ultimately, it's such a luck of the draw to exist. And I know that there's so many people who can't take this perspective because it simply seems not possible. But regardless, I want to share it because I saw this TikTok the other day, and it was talking about right now experiencing life and earth as if you're experiencing it for the first time, as if you have just began to exist. And from this very moment, maybe this is the trigger, but there doesn't need to be any reasoning. You can change at any moment. At this moment, start experiencing the world around you, looking around and just pretending and acting that you're seeing it for the first time. And you start to just realize how crazy our environments and our world and our consciousness is that we are able to have this experience. It blows my mind. But yeah, I think this is what I want to leave you with, I believe. I'm checking my notes because I don't want to forget anything in particular. But if there's anything that you're going to take away from this podcast and this talk that we've had, I'd love it. I'd love it for you that, yeah, if you experienced life as if it was the first time you were experiencing it, with no past, with no promise of a future, and just right now, and just start to marvel at what a world we get to live in. I think that's one of the most important things that I can leave you with. And yeah, ultimately in regards to friendships, they are going to come and go, and they're so special. And I think in the same facet of enjoying what we have right now, enjoy friendships right now. They may not be there in the future. They may be there in the future. Regardless, we have to cherish them, because there's no promise of tomorrow. In saying that, regardless of friendships and connections, I think one of the most important things that I could share today from my own experiences and just what I've learnt through making mistakes and just doing lots of growing and healing and introspection is really learning to know yourself outside of friendships, outside of what obligations you feel, outside of the identity of your friendship group and the similarities that you have and what binds you to them. I feel like that's something that's really, 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 really important, because regardless of how close your friendships are, it is astounding how quickly people will forget you after you die. And I don't mean that to be cynical. I don't mean that to be depressing. And I don't mean that to cause anything in the way of sad emotions. I purely mean it because I know when I heard it, I thought that's ridiculous, because what I have loved the idea of is a legacy, and not a legacy through children, but a legacy through art and a legacy through, creation, entertainment and stuff like that. But I think hearing that, I can't remember, it was from some kind of speech, it really, really resonated with me. That it is remarkable how quickly people will go about their lives after you die. And because of that, you have to live life for you. I think that's all. I think that's really all that matters. Yeah. This has been really, really enjoyable. I've really, really liked it. And thank you so much for sitting down with me, whether you're driving right now or you've been washing the dishes or, sitting down, driving a car, in the shower, whatever you're doing, going for a walk. Don't know why I said it like that. But yeah, thank you so much for just listening, being part of this conversation. And I hope that some of it has resonated with you. Yeah. I hope that we could have more chats like this in the future. But yeah. Bye guys. Love you.